so you don't need to memorize it.
Yeah, but makes me feel more comfortable if I have it here on paper. There's so much data.
Okay, well, you have 5 minutes. I guess we can start, no? 5 minutes is enough.
Hey, everybody, tune in to Recent Tartarians.
Recent Tartarians. Recent Tartarians. Recent Tartarian. Recent Tartarian.
Hey, everybody, tune in to Recent Tartarians.
Recent Tartarians. Recent Tartarians.
5 minutes later, Grüß Gott, Luskates. Welcome to the show. How's it going? I think this is NEUROPA. We're doing kind of a Europa thing. Raphael is here with me, and we now have MFR. I don't know if that's how you say your name, but that's what I'm reading. So what's up? What is that how you go by yourself? Oh, and you're muted. I should probably help you with that. Is there like a way? Boom, ask to unmute. See if that worked.
Yes, this helps. MFR is just the initials.
Oh, so what do you usually go by? What's your normal
Michael.
name? Michael. There, that works. That's good.
Yeah.
So
Michael works.
So I do know this about Michael. He is involved in consciousness, starvation of consciousness. He's aware of, and he's working with wheat extraction. Is that right? Is that your expertise?
Just flour. It's
Flour.
It's just the most ordinary type of flour. You take the grain, put it in the mill, grind it, and what you get is flour.
Well, I'll make the intro this way then. So I remember in America in the 1890s, we have this thing called the Great Flour Mill Explosion, and it's because there's gluten in flour, and there's essentially a huge amount of stored energy in flour, and when a certain amount of static electricity or friction to electricity causes a spark, then the spark can cause flour to explode. So in food, there's a tremendous amount of energy, right? And we refine it, and we make both bread and bombs from wheat and flour. So on that note, let me introduce Michael, who's interested in the power of food. And can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I can give you an explanation for the explosion. It's not flour, but it's flour dust.
Okay.
So when you have saturated air and then you have fire, then it burns pretty well. I don't know what's in.
Oh, the oxygen is feeding on there you go.
Because you have these small particles, they burn really well. People who spit fire use flour, for example.
Interesting.
So
Not
if you would allow me,
disgusting as gasoline.
just
And
in
it's
terms of-
highly explosive. It's highly explosive. When I was in Parliament in Austria, I brought 1 kilogram of flour, and they checked for weapons.
Wow.
But the flour was no problem. And then when I met the officials, I really had to laugh, because it was like, so do you know, like 1 kilo of flour, this could do a lot of damage. But
Yeah, can you imagine a more menacing character than the Pillsbury Doughboy? This guy right here, just ready to start a fire, just wants to set the world ablaze. Raph, you look like you were about to say something.
Indeed. So if I may, just to give a general introduction. So I met Michael a few years ago, just as I met you a few years ago, Andreas. And Michael told me this wonderful story about wheat processing, and that in the 1850s, and he will get more into the story, they industrialized or industrially started removing the seedling from any type of wheat, and lo and behold, guess what? This happened around 1850, when all kinds of other strange things. I just recently looked up on Wikipedia. Who can believe this? 1848. It even says the year of revolutions. And then it says, in completely unrelated fashion, 50 countries had revolutions during that year. I mean, what is going on? This was also the time when this wheat processing thing was changed. And he just told me that obviously all the good stuff is in there. And that is why if you just start removing that industrially, you don't tell anybody, people will, in a sense, start starving. Because before they got all their nutrients, everyone check out the website, goldkeim.com, and you can read up all about it. And then they basically start starving. And even if they don't know what's going on, they're going to be more angry. They're going to be more anxious. They're going to be more in a scarcity-based mindset, which, of course, is super important for divide and conquer control structures. And my idea was simply that we line this up also with his astrological knowledge about the Pluto cycles, which is something quite interesting, and line up the wheat processing, the Pluto cycles, and whatever Andreas or the chat can throw in terms of what other events happened during that time, and see if we can correlate it. Because, of course, in my mind, there are no coincidences, even if not everyone involved is aware. there's something going on there, and I want to see how this matches up.
Right. Yeah. So I was thinking about food in terms of bread being the number one diet for virtually everyone in Europe. And it was something like it was like a kilo of bread or 2 kilos of bread or more a day, at least. Right. And living off of bread. So clearly bread was healthier if they were able to do that and live off mostly that. Right.
There is even just one brief example, the Weston Price Foundation, when I was researching nutrition, and it was almost impossible to find any independent information, right? But Weston A. Price is this foundation, and they went to differing indigenous groups, as they call them. One of them, coincidentally, was some kind of mountain tribe in Switzerland, and all they were eating all day was some kind of cheese, and they ate bread.
Yeah.
But they had perfect teeth. Everyone wants perfect teeth, so you got to wonder what kind of minerals, aside maybe from the air and not having so much stress and not so many EMF, but still there must be something even within the simple food that is perfectly able to sustain them if prepared properly, and most likely not industrially destroyed as we are doing it as default.
Right. Yeah. So Michael, what do you think about that? Do you think that there's about health and food in general?
Well, I like to compare it with cars and petrol. It's, for some reason, it's easier to understand for most of the people that if you put the wrong fuel in the car, it doesn't work. So our bodies are more advanced. We can go on that, but it has some side effects. It was 1864, I think, was a new invented way of grinding grains. And to me, like one highlight in the whole story was that it was not just wheat or like bread grains. I don't know, how do you call it in English? In German, it's bread grains. Like the grains you make bread out is a bread grain.
Like
and
bread.
Have different kind of grains.
I think Germans have more specific words for everything, but we probably have a word somewhere in some dictionary we don't use very often or something. I don't know.
So the whole story started with rice. And when they started to do industrialized rice peeling, this is when the story started. It started a little bit earlier than this new type of grain processing. And also with maize, corn.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, shucking the corns and things.
You can't degerminate millet because it's too small. You can't get the germ out. But it turned out that, like, basically the majority of people who lives on grains lost the germ, which is the most important part. So if you have to decide if you go for bran, germ, or the carbs, you should throw away the carbs, because carbs are very easy to supplement. Like everything has, in plants, everything there is some kind of sugar or plant carbs. But the density of minerals and vitamins, amino acids in the germ is enormous. I did a calculation in Austria. We eat 89 kilos a year of grain.
Wow.
And the amount in germ and bran would be 7 grams per day. So you would have 7 grams per day more vitamins, amino acids, and minerals, and other stuff we don't know. Because if we take the known ingredients that are in the germ and put it together, it won't grow. There will be no plant coming out. So, I really like this scientific approach, but the basic thing is missing, is this life.
So what is it about the germ? What is the germ itself? What is the part of it that is?
The germ would be the baby of the grain. If you have the plant, you have the grain dies, then you can take the seeds, which would be the grain like rice or wheat or barley whatsoever. And if you look at the grain, you have on the bottom, there is 3% of the whole would be the germ. And then you have the food for the germ, which is flour to us. And this would be packed in the bran, which protects the whole thing.
And so
once it's,
oh, good.
If it has contact to water, it starts to sprout again.
So
And then a new plant is growing.
Is the grain is the germ of the grain, why is it, what's it about it that's holding so much nutrients? Why does it have so much extra amino acid and mineral?
That I don't know.
That, but you're saying the germ is like the egg almost.
May I just
It's
say
the yolk.
even
If you compare it to the egg, it's the yolk.
Yeah. Okay.
and even with wheatgrass, if you have wheatgrass, barley grass, like the fresh one is usually the most nutritious. And
Sure.
just generally speaking, where is the most vitality within new life? And I mean, in this case, I'm not going to comment more about this, but let's just say at least it's just plants in this case,
Well,
So, yeah.
but even I was going to say, it's, egg yolk, it kind of connects to there's a lot of rich, that's where the baby is in seeds in general. Right. And
it is the baby. It would be the embryo.
Right. And so seed sprouts, the kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed. An activated sprouted seed tends to have healthier qualities, the special kinds of oils that are starting to be created. So I can imagine, I can imagine there's something to that. Why did we get rid of that? Why did we stop focusing on, we have all this, Wonder Breads and things like that. What was the reason that we cut out the germ?
From my point of view, it's a side effect of industrialized food production. So first industrialized mill was in America. I think it was 1798 or so. But it was still grinding with stones. And 1860 around, there was the roller mills. Is this a familiar term? It's like two mills, and they go this way. And from my research, it was close, like at the same time invented in Europe and in America.
Someone says, I'm a breatharian in training. Thoughts? Have you heard of the breatharian thing? Katie says that. Katie, I'd say enjoy some snacks while practicing breatharianism, because I remember there's a story about, do you know what breatharianism is really quickly?
No.
Okay, so breatharianism was this cult of people that said they could live off nothing but air and sunlight, right? And switch to full photosynthesis. And one of the most famous breatharian cult leaders was from Santa Cruz, California, where Robert Anton Wilson and crazy people like me are from. And they basically found them at a McDonald's, the leader of the breatharians. And they're like, "What? I thought you said you didn't have to ever eat food." And they're like, I don't. You think this is food? I just like it for the taste. I'm not even kidding. That really happened. But okay, sorry for the diversion.
This would be like some kind of really nasty bomb, like just the imagination. You live on sunlight and air, and then you go for a Big Mac, so it would destroy me.
Right? Yeah. It seems pretty crazy. I don't know. But what do you think about, I'm sorry, you were saying the evolution of the food processing system, and in the 1880s, I think, or 1840s, 1860s, this full transition happens where humans were living off, for the most part, the caviar of the grain. And now we're living off the shucked shells of the grain. And what was the big change? Like, what was the transition that we saw in health?
I I don't know what we found. What we found. This was my own research. It was like a big surprise. I did a self experiment. I wanted to know why bread is a metaphor for life. It made
Mm,
no sense to me at all because for 30 years I had bread. So what's the life in it?
right.
Um,
They've made bread and a prison food, right? You can. That's all you can think of, really. Bread and water is the prison food. The two
this
healthiest things, you know.
this would be an. I always thought, well, wow, bread and water. This would be a long and painful death. A short and painful death because you just starve basically to death. But once I got into like real bread, I said, well, hang on a second, this could take pretty long
Right.
because it's high density food, and the food like like 1950s. I just saw a documentary, um, like traditional bread making in small villages in Germany, and they did not knead the dough, they were stepping on it.
Wow.
So it was really, really high dense bread, which lasted for a month because they only baked one time a month, and then they baked the whole bread for the month.
Whoa.
And this is like, so we don't know this kind of food. It's like nowadays you have up to 50% water at least in the dough. If you have a baguette, I think it's up to 70%. So basically, what the big switch was from flour to some kind of water. It's a little bit better than a PET bottle.
What about yeast? Because like, so I think like pumpernickel bread and things is still yeasted. Is the yeast a major part of like the kinds of yeast that are in beers and in breads? Like, I know that they gave a Nobel Peace Prize to, was it, what's that Danish beer? Carl's something or other. Carlsbad.
Carlsberg.
Carlsberg. They gave the Nobel Prize to one of the brewers there because they had figured out how to make a yeast that would consume corn syrups and malt syrup synthetics the same as
Okay.
regular natural yeast or natural sugars, right? So I mean, what are we replacing in the bread? Is it the same molds and same probiotics that are turning the grains into the bread, or have we changed that as well?
Definitely. I'm not familiar in detail, but the yeast we have now cannot be compared to the yeast 100 years ago.
Mm.
Part of that is genetically modified, and it's like if you read recipes and you have some kind of a dumpling or a cake based on a yeast dough, it's always this, and be careful and no cold wind, and you have to, keep it safe.
Mm.
I grew up with this knowledge just to find out that you can do whatever you want. This dough will go, it will rise. I mean,
Interesting.
maybe if you electrocute it, then it will not rise, but
Maybe even
wind,
then.
maybe then it explodes.
Yeah, I mean, so I've seen like that's another funny thing. Everyone gives credit to Germans for Reinheitsgebot, the beer law to make sure that all beer is uniform and made the same. But of course, that's not even the best beer. You go to like Belgium and stuff, and there's like craft beers that are different style beers. And then they'll even say in Belgium, oh, well, one of these beers isn't even made from hops, it's made from another barley or a different kind of local grain because we weren't forced to follow these grain rules. So it seems like beer and bread, which are also very closely related, have changed dramatically. Like beer even was a health food very recently. And then the
It was some
German.
kind, it still is some kind of food.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean,
Like,
what? Yeah.
yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Now it has lots of minerals, and it's some kind of like the good substitute to Gatorade. or something like it.
Right? Yeah, I mean, the
But beer
electrolytes.
works. That's an important difference. Beer really works. If you work in a hot climate, you have to sweat a lot. Beer helps.
Yeah. I mean, and so they've got so many different places around the world now, especially, the United States and I think China as well, that, like I said, they're feeding the beer instead of natural grains and things. They're feeding it a GMO malt, some sort of a syrup that they've created. And so they've created this synthetic thing that kind of tastes like beer, at least whatever Budweiser is, but then isn't really made of actual natural ingredients and probably has lost, I would assume, the health benefits that come along with that. So, I mean, what do you think we're doing? I mean, is this all just natural, or is it an accident of capitalism, of engineering, or do you think there's some sort of a goal to take away like the nutritions?
I think it's a consequence. This would be a good example for don't explain with malice what can be explained with stupidity, because the combination of financial, it's not actually, it's a duty to have a financial, what's the word, where you have to increase your money. I don't even know it. What's the word? Profit. Ha.
Oh yeah. Well, that says a lot about us. Yes. That's what we need to start working on. Yes. Profiting. Yes. Thank you.
So you have to have a profitable business, and it's like one motivation. The other one is like making a product that sells, and that combined with and not knowledge about how the human body works or how nature works. It's like 1927 quantum physics started, and there was this like which led us to the conclusion that there is no such thing as matter by itself. It's like a combination of a field that can materialize. And still we are working on this materialistic point of view. So if you have like if the core concept is wrong, and you have to make profit, and you want to push products, and there is this shelf life topic, these three ingredients are designed for the perfect design for disaster. There must not be, or there doesn't have to be bad intention. It will kill you anyway.
Yeah, it can just be the consequences.
Yeah, and I just have to bring up the other side of this question. Number one, we have apparently tradition, Ayurvedic medicine, all kinds of traditions. How incredibly ignorant must the population of Europe or wherever have been to blindly accept this, not question it, and just starving? And or wouldn't this even be an argument again for some type of a reset where you have a completely ignorant population and you can just feed them whatever you want, and they won't notice? So to me, it's a bit hard to believe that. I mean, I understand the profit motive, and I agree. Life motive, I also agree. But then again, at least the population or the consumers must have been incredibly ignorant to just accept this and not even notice, And also the argument about not knowing about the body, at least globally speaking, I also don't think this makes sense. Paradigm, you're artificially dumb, but overall the knowledge was there, and that if you remove something from a living system, that it potentially decreases its quality. I mean, is that so far-fetched? I wouldn't say so.
I think about quinoa, for example, and certain kinds of rice in parts of the caliphate that became Spain. So many different people were against using the local grains of a place they conquered for the Eucharist. They wanted the Eucharist to be made out of, European style wheats, which are really, from maybe the Caucasus, but they're not even really European to begin with, that kind of wheat. Same thing with rice, though. In Spain, it was probably, Arabic or Asian. But when they got to the Americas, in Peru and Bolivia specifically, they were eating quinoa, but also into Argentina and places. And they thought, what if the quinoa worked its way into the Eucharist sacrament for the Catholic Church? They would be eating this indigenous form of Christ, which would, taint his body. Or that's at least the way it was presented at the time, in any books that I've seen, that they're saying we got to stop this thing. And they were burning fields of it and trying to force everyone onto the wheat diet. And I at least see also similarly, it rhymes with today, third world, fourth world countries that are exporting their quinoa or their rice or their local grain for money to people, hipster bourgeoisie, Amazon shoppers, while they eat this Chinese imported noodle, and they're eating noodles in these little mountain towns because it's much cheaper than, the synthetic noodles, much cheaper than anything that they're growing, and that can be sold. So, I mean, that's going on everywhere.
True.
We also pull up
Like
your
the whole story started with rice, Raphael, and the Chinese have in their culture that they know that the germ is the essence.
Mhm.
They have it in their culture, and still they did it.
Why? Do you know why?
I think it can be explained with like that the background frequency from an astrological point of view, that we were in this discover mode. We will track it, like everything is superstitious. We have to get rid of the Catholic Church with this God dogma, and everything can be explained with God. And then there was this science that said, well, no, we want to have proof. And it started very interesting, but then like some 100 years later, it was like, so now we have to prove everything, and this just doesn't work. It's like if you have a tool that just goes by itself.
So, I mean,
we went a little bit too far with this tool.
When the Europeans did this, it was different than the Asians, though, right? With rice, like rice is being degerminated in China today, but it wasn't 180 years ago. Is that correct?
No, they started in China, actually in India. The British, of course.
Oh, the British started degerminating. Okay.
Well, that's another thing again, because what I was about to say with the university and so on, or the materialist paradigm, in my mind right now, and talking to David Ewing again and again, by now I'm in the position that I'm like, even this whole university paradigm with the entire materialism was most likely planted by certain, let's say, particular religious orders. So I'm just saying, even here, I'm kind of questioning this approach and why was this pushed? Was this really organic? Although what I would like to do, Michael, if you agree, is pull up your chart, so at least we can correlate with the astrological features, because even here, who, if not certain religious orders, would be aware of those cycles and at the very least use them to their advantage? So I think it's a good tool, to correlate that. Yeah.
Is it on the Goldkind website? Is that the correct link? Or the other
I
site?
think I sent it to you on Telegram, Andreas.
Oh, 1 second. That's right. The chart.
Yes, just the image.
Ta-da. Okay.
There we
This
go.
guy?
Yeah.
Let me.
Exactly.
I'll pull out and then tell me if you want to zoom into a spot.
You have to go to the first green area.
Look here.
A little more to the left. Yeah, there we are. This is Pluto in Taurus. 53 to 84.
Wow. Okay. And so beginning, go ahead and explain your chart here. So we get from.
So like in very simple terms, Taurus is about what is in English?
It's like a bull. I imagine a yoke.
Taurus is the bull. Yeah, it's about eating grass, standing in the sun, enjoy life. Enjoy life in a material way. Very important. Taurus
Sort
is a materialistic sign.
sort of like these 60s here. Yeah, I can see that
This would
connection.
be Virgo. It's not about so much about enjoyment, but guilt and pureness.
Okay. I thought the green was connected, but yeah, okay. I see.
Yeah,
what's
the
going on.
green is Earth, the element Earth.
I see what's going on here. Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
And but Taurus is like, I want to increase matter. Okay, so it is a very, very materialistic sign, and Pluto transforms it. Right now we have Pluto in Capricorn, which is the last. This would be about structure and law and order and hierarchy and state and government. Now this area is transformed. Transformed means it goes into something which is not what it was before. It's like it's totally different. First you have lead, then you have gold. This would be a transformation. Or first you have the cow, then you have the burger. It's also some kind of transformation. You cannot recognize what it was before.
Yeah, I mean, sure, the world looks different at this point completely.
So we are perfectly on track. This is my main argument when I talk to Raphael about like conspiracy. It's like it's perfect. It's
Right.
perfect. It's a perfect alignment with the with astrology. When you see 37 to 65, when Pluto was in Leo, the superheroes popped out of nowhere. I think Superman was 1939. There was a consciousness of superheroes arrived. Could be Stalin, could be Hitler, could be Superman, could be the Hoover Dam was built in this time. It was like big and wow, we can rule fucking everything because we are the kings of the universe. It's a generational topic on the one hand, like the children who were born in this area, but it was also expressed in the flow of life. It's like I'm the greatest. I am the greatest. What we're gonna do? We fight each other, and the greatest will survive. And poof, yeah.
Right. And the transformation, you're right, like the X-Men mutant period transforming to Dvapara Yuga or whatever you're calling like
political X-Men, yes.
Yeah, I mean you got this entire generation, but everything that goes with it, you're right, refinement of salts, these increasing of high blood pressure and sodium chlorine salt alternatives, these different kinds of new salts that they're creating for people. My grandparents are on diabetic high blood pressure salts. They're horrible. These fake salts that they made for them.
Yeah, just to point something out, when I was in America also, I saw everyone, oh my God, I have to watch my sodium intake. I have this and that, disease or whatever. And I'm like, sodium, you even know what you're talking about? Because just like with the grain processing, with the refinement of salt, you remove all the minerals. And there is a great book, I believe the guy is called Joel Wallach, and it's called Dead Doctors Don't Lie. And there in Dead Doctors Don't Lie, they basically explain, one of the main ingredients of being healthy is having 93 minerals available. Most of them are in unrefined salt. And if you refine it, you remove it, then again, you're on a starvation diet and you don't even realize it because it's not being relabeled. Bread is bread, salt is salt, but there is no more nutrients inside. And you're starving yourself, and everyone is actually on this diet. That's the default diet everyone has, and nobody knows that your main staple products, if you don't really know their quality, are most likely a faked up, falsely labeled, nutrient deficient food product, but not really healthy, for you.
Lest we forget that Vienna, Wiens, and Salzburg, all the way to under Germany, and I forget exactly where, but it's like pretty far, kilometers into Germany, and there are treaties to protect these underground salt mines because the infrastructure that ran Europe and Asia in Africa through the salt trade I mean, Russia to Spain, where the salt trade was the most important thing. Think about how much power is in lithium and in salts for batteries, and think about how much power is in salt crystals for food, for the energy. And yeah, I mean, Salzburg is one of the main ways that people stay healthy today, is they build these salt caves that kill off all these bacteria and viruses and things like that. So salt's a huge, salt and grain, the most important thing.
Yeah.
And copper roofs. Good job, Austria.
So what happened was that the food changed, but the word stayed the same. You have
Right.
salt, you have flour, you have sugar. There's wonderful studies in like 1920s where they discovered people who live on like sugarcane,
Hmm.
and they examined the teeth and they were perfectly healthy. You can see it in Africa, you can see it in Asia. They're chewing on the sugarcane and they have teeth like you have these toothpaste advertisements in the Western world. You know, perfectly healthy. But there you have all the supplements, you have all the minerals, you have whatsoever. It's like a living substance. And you do the same with refined sugar, and have a look at the Inuit in Alaska. They basically wiped it out, introducing sugar and white flour. They couldn't handle it. And the ones who survived, they were done with alcohol. So
these refined foods that are basically they're just too much for our system, or they're not enough, or what is
I
it?
think it's too less. It's like if you go to church and let's say history is correct, and there was like 2,000 years, there was this Last Supper,
Or
and
1,000,
there was
you know.
this. Let's just take the story.
Okay.
Doesn't have to be true. It's like what is true. But if you take the metaphor of bread and wine, you have bread would be a metaphor for reincarnation, because the plant dies, then you take the grain is the new life, it starts again. It's like a circle, but it's, one dimension. And then you take the other grain, which is a grape, and you transform it into wine. And then it becomes some kind of a transcendent energy. So from this point of view, the Last Supper makes sense to me. I have no idea how it was meant, but it's like you have these cycles of life, and there is a quality that can transcend it. Right. So when you go to church, what do you get? You get pure starch. There is no life at all. And the wine, no more. I don't know how it is in America, but in Austria, I think I had one time I got a sip of wine for the Holy Mass. Holy Mass, that's the right word. It's a Holy
Right.
Mass.
We're pretty lucky in America because we're so distant from the Vatican that we could go Protestant at any moment, and they know it. And so the Catholic Church kind of are pretty lenient with Americans. They're like, you want to be trans and gay? That's fine. So basically, yeah, we get to have mass more often. I think almost any country I've ever been in has mass for the proletariat, for the common man.
But with bread and wine, or just
in America, you've got these little crackers, and you've got this cheap wine. That's my next question, though, is about the wine, because wine in the Bible is a big thing, and Mormons are like, oh, wine really means grape juice. They don't know what they're talking about. It wasn't really alcohol, but I can see it, which is kind of hard for me to go on, because I get the feeling that we would have known the difference. Jesus would have known the difference, and he probably wouldn't have been as popular at a party just for turning water into grape juice. But if it is true that wine used to be better for you, that's another question. Because it does look like we invented harder liquors, or started drinking recreationally medicinal liquors like vodka. Might have existed in the dark ages to clear your stomach parasites or something, but people are just drinking it now in cocktails. What happened? What with alcohol? Like, is there or is it alcohol, or what is it? What was healthy about wine?
Don't know.
You're a grain guy, that's fair. But you can imagine living off bread and wine. You
I
know?
like wine, and I have some. How do you say? I did experiment on alcohol, but there's different kind. I think one part is like this. In a small dose, it has a benefit. Like from a medical point of view, if you go for small one, it would lower the. You have basically what you have is instant relaxation. This is alcohol, and as far as I know, wine. I think it was invented in Bulgaria.
Maybe I can help you out a little bit from what I understand. This may be with different plants, but in particular with wine and in general, I guess with all plants, they basically pre-digest nutrients for you. And one of the things I believe I had read with wine in particular is that there may actually be colloidal or even monoatomic gold, simply due to the type of soil that the plant prefers. And it's making it bioavailable. And from that point of view, it could be, at least as Michael says, in a certain degree, highly beneficial, but again, only if it has the right quality and was processed in the proper way and so on, then it could actually be healthy. But again, it's a matter of quality.
I think it is. I really think it is. It's like if you have an 8 of red wine, it feels good.
Inside of the Ages says, Jesus deceitfully told Romans unleavened bread. Unleavened bread? Is that what he's saying?
Lemon bread?
Unleavened. Unknown.
Right. Like a flat
bread. And then Planet X Hunter says thanks for the grift, which is good. Or for the grift. Well, thank you. Okay. Sorry, continue.
If you have an overdose of alcohol, then you go to the Greeks, you have Bacchus, and you go in some kind of ecstasy, which has also can be beneficial if you go in this alcohol-induced trance or
right. Voodoo priests in Haiti and Haiti do that as well, right? They have these rituals where they drink and then they're able to go through bulletproof glass or something.
Right. Yeah. If you're drunk, you can do the most amazing stuff and survive for some reason. Really, you can.
Can't always survive, but yeah, I mean, it's pretty impressive.
You do it once in a while. If you do it every day, it kills you.
Yeah, right.
But if you have a little bit every day, like the French are famous for that, then you get the Spanish too.
Yeah.
Italians like yeah. Well, then you become pretty old.
You'd be surprised how many cultures have an alcohol thing going on. I think everyone's like, oh, look at the Irish, or look at the Croatians, look at the Russians, look at the Italians. Like, yeah, well, the Germans have beer too. It seems like if you go anywhere, you're gonna find.
The question is though also here, to what degree was this forced upon the populace, or at least increased, especially with the re-emergence of the modern Catholic Church, that again makes it a thing to give it to you at 12 years old. And then, of course, you have the brewery hosted by the brothers, how they're called, the monks, and so on. So I'm like, well, am I just creating my own consumers here? I'm not even going to get into any deeper or darker stuff now, but that's, I think, another question, because it is kind of strange. Why is everyone so crazy on alcohol in all the countries? You have this great culture for alcohol, even though the alcohol is so bad everywhere, it's like something.
But you also have these dry spells that come over a country, right? I mean, they didn't want, I think Germany, for a while, they were trying to stop beer because the Catholic Church said, hey, we're Roman. We like wine. Why would we even want to continue? This is a barbarian tradition or something. But Martin Luther, amongst others, said, hey, beer makes a man, keeps him safe because he keeps him occupied and makes him go to bed early and things like that. So they appreciated, to an extent, beer and alcohol. There's also like vodka. Vodka was used originally to clear parasites in your stomach if you drank something that was bad. And gin, similarly, because the water was at a certain point pretty bad. Not necessarily that the water itself was, but it is because it's been going through these cities and sewers and London, for
Wine
instance.
too.
Right? Yeah. Well, go elaborate on wine.
No, I said wine too. It was not this kind of wine we have today. It was much thinner. So
Mhm.
children drank it because it was safer than water.
Right. And so,
Makes
you know,
sense.
that makes enough sense to me if you didn't have if they weren't purifying water, but also then it says why and when did this start that they didn't have pure water? And was this, you know, because of some sort of a collapse of civilization? We think of the Roman civilization having all these flowing fountains until the barbarians cut the aqueducts, right? That's the story.
Now I'm gonna read your super chat. So Inside of the Ages says leavened means yeast psychoactive versus unleavened no yeast.
There we go.
And so he says they shall eat the one that's not psychoactive, because that's the other story always with the beer. I just mentioned it again. If you add mushrooms to it or something, or like super good herbs, I could see myself drinking beer all day. But like this with the German Reinheitsgebot, you know, it's like boring and tastes pretty bad, you know. So yeah.
That's interesting. The idea that maybe the bread, the yeast is psychoactive because it has neurohormones in it of some kind, because the yeast itself has neurohormones similar to the ones that humans use. Yeast itself would use to communicate with itself.
But yeast is a type of fungus, no?
Right. And so
Yeah.
fungus is a kind of,
Because fungus is like a big thing. And even recently, I mean, you talk to different people on festivals and so on, you know, the idea of the mycelium, even with Michael, comes up again and again. So here I would like to know, like, what did Christ say, or whose version of Christ was that? And I always think it's relevant. Like, do they tell you to use the psychoactive stuff, or do they tell you to be afraid of it? Because usually if they tell you to be afraid of it, they like want to control your relationship to, you know, the divine or what is reality and truth. So I'd be curious, maybe Inside of the Ages can specify on that exactly.
Speaking of which, anyone in the audience who knows this would be, and this is kind of a side note, but at one point, Tim Pool had this loaf of bread at his house that we were eating that he got off the internet that was made out of mushrooms. It was a mushroom fungus bread that tasted like a pumpernickel. It was like a thick loaf of bread. If anyone has any idea what kind of fungus-based bread, keto fungus-based bread exists, please let us know, because I've been trying to find that for like a year. But there's also, there are breads that are literally made out of mycelial fungus, and those are supposedly better for you as well. But mushrooms are in the human eukaryote, or rather in the Apis thecanta eukaryote, which Animalius and different kinds of metazoa fall into. So mycelial networks are closer to animal than they are to plant, and they have the same neurohormones that humans have. And so we would be able to experience a lot of the same it wouldn't always be like a psychedelic, but it might be inertly psychoactive to just have those hormones.
Because even here, just general question, like they talk about communion and so on or whatever, like it is relevant what type of substances I put into my body, most likely also for my consciousness. And as lead with psychoactive compounds, we know it can greatly affect, let's say, my ability or propensity for empathy and so on. And these are like fundamental values in terms of social cohesion, whether you have rituals encouraging that, or whether everyone should run from it, and you have the priest telling you you're guilty because you were born or something.
But if it was before before the priests were crazy, and when people were listening to Royal Rife healing noises while on mushrooms in the cathedral, that makes way more sense than any other explanation so far, right? It's like, oh yeah, everyone was at a mass hysteria of or at least a communal good time, a good vibe. And there might be some truth to that as well. And then to push people further and further away from mushrooms and mycelial networks into being lonely drunks. That sounds kind of like what happened. Maybe I'm wrong, but
yeah,
big
that's
difference.
my kind of
If you
thinking.
get drunk alone or in company. Big difference.
Right. So what do you think happened in terms of the effects, though? It looks like you say 1850s, 1860s, we start having an industrialized shucking of all of these grains. People are losing the yolks. They're living off the egg whites of their own, wheat. And bread, you said, becomes kind of, it's the prison food, and it's the thing that they give you for free before you eat your meal at a restaurant, but it's not part of our diet, what are some of the health things that have happened and that have changed? I mean, isn't it true that we're better off today than we were 150 years ago? Is that not true?
Yes, of course, because now we have the internet and we can buy online, and it's very enjoyable to live right now.
Well, fair enough, but I just meant food wise. I mean, are we healthier without the, are we healthier that now that there's guys who eat nothing but steak? Are they healthier, or is the grain important, and are we missing, what's it done to us?
I'm still not sure. In the beginning, like the first 15 years of the research, it was like grain, and the staple since forever. And then ketogenic diet popped out, and I tried this, and I've found, well, like whole grain is good. It's much better than the refined one, but ketogenic diet is one step ahead. It's like purer in a way. So once you burn fat, the body works nicer.
Biodiesel, yeah, right. Switch to biodiesel, and your body's
totally.
happy.
And I don't think we had brought this up here just briefly. I don't know, Andreas. I always like to bring this up briefly. Do you know about the energy production methods in the body biologically? So I'll just mention the three main ones. The one is based on sugar. And this is one thing we even learned in biology, at least in Austria. This creates 2 ATP energy currency in the body,
Yeah, let me pull up the diagram.
Yeah, the Krebs cycle or whatever it's called, yeah. And the other one, so basically if your cells have oxygen available, according to this official story, it creates about 50 ATP. So it's like a, let's say, over 20-fold increase. And this was one paragraph in biology textbook. They never spoke any further about this. And I just
it's the most important thing we ever learned in
doesn't
biology.
Seem relevant at all, and this is also why it can be explained that anything you can do in your body that increases your ability to uptake and process oxygen, from breathing to certain diet to exercise to sunlight, whatever it may be for you, is highly beneficial. And the secret hint is that also basically all cancer exists in an acidic environment, where most oftentimes this aerobic processing is not available. So it's a low energy state within the body, which is responsible for most disease manifested on that level. Yeah. And then there's more types, but the third type would then be the ketone bodies, which is the fat processing in the body. And these are always available in the body, but the body really switches to it if you keep fasting for about 72 hours or really decrease your sugar intake drastically to at least, I think, below 50 grams per day or something. Then your body's kind of, because it has many options available, is switching more towards the ketone fat body processing. And that also appears to be highly efficient. I don't have a number here, but if we compare it, it also seems to be superior, most certainly, to the sugar processing and maybe even to the aerobic processing. Yeah,
I think it probably is, but in a certain way, you got to be impressed with how the wheat hit the top of the food pyramid. That's what we always say.
Why impressed? But so just briefly, this is a completely known story about the food pyramid, which was like 1970s or something. And I think even if you just look at hidden story of food pyramid or something like this, secret history, this was well publicized. I froze?
Yeah.
Froze.
Say it again.
So basically just look for the
did it again. Is every time you talk about important stuff, they're like, uh-oh, no, the American Dairy Association's gapping you, bro.
Exactly. So it's secret history or hidden history of the food pyramid. A few years ago, this was publicized in a very, official format. And basically what happened, of course, is they made this pyramid and they had, I guess, too much grain lying around or something. And it was, of course, a lobbying effort. This had nothing to do with what is really good for you. As usual, it was a lobbying effort. And that's how the old food pyramid at least was created. Maybe they updated it, but. Yeah.
But then, okay. I've always heard that too. My thought that's interesting is we're saying, hey, wait, grains were the staple. If we look back, people were eating 6 pounds or 3 kilos of bread a day and not much else in certain parts of Europe. Was that during the Dark Ages? Did the Dark Ages exist? Or is that just the way people used to live off pumpernickel because it was a dense German bread with seeds in it and things? And then, why is it still on the food pyramid? Is it really an accident that this is the foundation? Or are they telling us that now? Are they saying now to you, hey, you know what? There's not going to be enough bread for you to have bread every day. So why don't we just move that to be an exotic? Because you're not going to be able to live off of it anymore. Or is that too far going? I mean, because this kind of suggests to me the same model as what we're told in the Dark Ages, eating 5 to 7 servings of bread or grain a day. I mean, and it's all for the purpose again of those Krebs cycle 50 ATPs. The ATPs are, what we're seeing here as the value.
I think if you go from a practical point of view, it's much easier to sustain a large group of people with grains than with fat.
Mm-hmm.
So fat production is difficult. Like here in Austria, where I live, there is either you have animal-based fats or you have none, or very little. You have poppy seeds and what is line? Lineoil?
Linseed. Linseed.
Oh yeah.
Linseed. Okay, these are the two that grow here. But it's not as efficient like potatoes or grains. So if you have a large population, which I think, like from an historical point of view, makes sense that when we switched from nomad living to stay local, you can't sustain a large local population with fat. It would be possible by nature, like from the metabolism, but it's not possible from the point of view of agriculture. Tribal is okay, like First Nations, looks like they did when they go for the buffalo or for the Inuits go by fish, but they always had to have fiber. I think what's important in this point of view is that you have to add the microbiome, and like my amateur view would be that we have an earth within us. It's like, don't know if the earth is hollow, but we are. And we are like, we have this huge population inside of us, and it has a very important effect on our brain. Really an important effect on our brain. When I stopped smoking for the first time, for some reason, my mind started to see cigarettes for like 1 kilometer sharp. So something was overruling my intention, my mind intention. And we know now that if we cut the nerval connection from the what's called enteric nervous system, like the brain in the belly, if we cut the connections to the head brain or brain, the effect goes away. So if you chunk on sugar and you cut the nervous connection, the urge to eat sugar goes away, like that. So it seems that we have this huge population inside of us, which is part of our decision-making process. And it's not so much that modern food starves us as a human being, but it starves the microbiome.
Can you elaborate a bit more when you say microbiome? What do you mean?
Microbiome is bacteria and fungus and whatever.
The bus, you're the bus, and there's a bunch of kids living in your bus, basically.
Yes, it's like my brain would be the government, and this would be like the entire population. And once if I eat according to my mind, then from time to time there will be some kind of upheaval in my internal in the population. Then I go to the doctor, and the doctor gives me some medicine. Normally it's some kind of napalm for the microbiome called antibiotics. And for some reason the symptoms go away, but then everything
Everybody's
is
dead.
broken. It is really a perfect metaphor for what's
It does.
going on outside, what is going inside.
I can
It's
visualize white blood cells water skiing, you know, in Apocalypse Now in my tummy, which is nice.
So let me just add in, Inside of the Ages came back, and of course, according to him, Jesus was for the psychoactive ones, and the church, of course, reversed and changed that. In terms of the belly brain, there's, from what I understand, this is known now, there's like huge nerve centers there, and supposedly 90% of the nerves actually go from down there into your brain and not the other way around. So consider, everybody, how relevant it is what you put into your body. And then we don't even need to talk about extremes like glyphosate and so on that, you know, completely destroy everything it comes in contact with. But yeah,
no,
this
it's
is
really important, glyphosate, because it kills bacteria and fungus, and you know it's designed to kill the population inside. It was probably not meant to be. They wanted to kill the herbicides, like, of course it was.
have to be a particular idiot, but yes, of course, it's all possible. It's all perfectly possible. Yes.
It's amazing how possible it is for horrible things to happen. And I think it's important not to forget that. It's so easy to acknowledge and to notice that there are intentionally evil things for us. I think a lot of people miss that, so it's important to let them know. Yeah, there's evil in the world, but I can often think, my God, this has to be on purpose, and then see it happen for myself and understand how it could be the road to hell paved with good intentions. I mean, there are so many people trying to help people by getting rid of a thing because they know there's something bad about the thing, but that takes away the entire system around that thing, including all the good aspects. And that's kind of what it seems like is happening here. You know,
yeah,
often
well, at the very least, those individuals have a very narrow consciousness and have no clue about systems theory or anything like that at all, you know, which is
it's amazing. Sad. It's amazing because they're taught in school that would be bad. They're told you want to have a deep, narrow education so you can be really good at one thing, because you know you don't want to just know about stuff. You want to that won't be very useful. What do you think you're going to be? A manager, organizer, working with people? Go back to school. Yeah, it's kind of the thing, you know. But it's true.
Yeah,
We're
they
not
got their own schools
for
for the managerial class. Everyone else is just supposed to be a shudra or a worker, you know. So
yeah, you're an integrated circuit. You're a calculator for a specific kind of program, right? Man, but so I've been hearing a lot more and more about keto because of that. You know, people saying, "Hey, this isn't the way to go." And then, Michael, you're saying that's not sustainable for the whole population. Is that why keto is kind of aimed as a more expensive diet fad for the elite and for the hipsters? Is it just
no, I think not. It's like, to me it was interesting that if you apply food in your body, sugar has to be dealt first. So if you have like sugar and fat, the body starts with the sugar, and the fat is stored. So it's no problem to have too much fat. If you live ketogenic diet, you can have fat like whatever you want. There is no upheaval in your body. But if you do the same with sugar, then there is alarm. You know, the body has to deal with the sugar. And on the other hand, it's like they found out when there was this question how to get bears fed for hibernation. Is it hibernation? I think so.
Yes.
Yeah. And first they eat lots of salmon or whatever, but then before the winter comes, the berries become ripe. And so they eat berries, and this switches the operating system of the digestion to store the fat and calories.
Wow.
It's like you add sugar and the body goes switch into store. So they can easily increase weight. And then they go for hibernation, and some months later they wake up and yeah, here we are again. So we do this all the time. On the other hand, if like human beings, and you harvest food, blah blah blah, and then the winter comes. First, when there is the abundance of food, you can increase the energy storage in your body. But then if you run out of food, the body switches back to ketogenic. So it starts to eat up the reservoirs. You have the same mechanism once you fast. After the third day, you switch to ketogenic diet. That's normal. Normal people get a headache because then the poison comes out of the tissue, which is also stored. Whatever cannot be either digested or put out of the body will be stored inside the tissues.
Wow. So what is the sugar itself? What is the sucrose or fructose? Why is it why is that? Is it like a salt? Why are sugars breaking down? Why does sucrose and fructose break down so fast?
Well, we have fructose and we have, what's the other one?
Glucose.
Fructose is one part of sugar.
Sucrose.
Sucrose. Okay. So I learned that there are two organs that need gluco. That's the real word. What is it called?
Glucose, like the
glucose. Exactly. Yeah. Thank you. And that is the heart and the brain.
The carbohydrate sugar.
Yeah. Heart and brain needs a little bit of glucose, but the body can create the glucose out of amino acids. It can build glucose for itself as long as it has the amino acids. Gluconeogenesis is the word. Sorry, what was the question again?
It was just about sugars, the idea of sugars and their structure, why we're digesting them first before moving on, why they're more complicated.
I think from the glucose level in the blood. If you have too much, you have a problem. If you have too less, you don't have a problem. It's like what I learned, like, if unless you have you're diabetic. This is dangerous. Also ketogenic. If you're diabetes type 1, you must not have ketogenic diet. But all the other ones can live on fat easily. If you have too much sugar for a long time in the blood, you get pretty much ill. Just, I don't know why, but I know it is. It's like common sense.
Right. Yeah. It seems like sugars also lead to fermentation in the gut for your gut fauna, and so can become alcohols, which is also kind of funny.
This is one. Also, fructose is treated by the liver as alcohol.
Right.
That's why we have the children with liver cirrhosis.
Right.
And the medical term is non-alcoholic liver cirrhosis.
Man.
It's even called that way. And the easiest way to get this as a child, either your mother is high on sugar, then the child. We came so far. The children are born with diabetic.
Wow.
Okay, so they have to, like, this small little baby inside the womb starts to metabolize sugar. And if you live on sodas and fruit juice, you basically live on alcohol.
Raph pulled up this book just now, Biological Transmutations from 1989.
Yes,
What's this about?
just as we talk about, you know, food and how elements are processed within the body, this is a very, you know, heretics book, let's say, though even it has pretty high ratings. The main experiment here simply was, you know, in mainstream modern chemistry, one would say that it is impossible to transmute one element into another. There's a table of elements, right? And they're basically fixed. Or am I wrong, Xirtus? That what we learn in chemistry, right? Or Michael. So, you know, you cannot change gold into something else or whatever. And what he basically did
Many would
is,
argue, but yeah, it's hard.
well, he would argue too, because the experiment here was with chickens and he fed them a very controlled diet and knew exactly how much calcium they would take in. And then with the eggs they produced, they basically produced much more calcium than they could ever have eaten. And here he goes on to explain how within the body it appears to be possible that there is some kind of proton exchange, for lack of a, you know, more exact description of that, and that
Bioalchemy.
actually, given, as I would call it, proper voltage or general energy availability within the body, it is very well possible to transmute elements within the body. And the other link that I had sent is Günther Enderlein. This is about basically also the biome and the terrain. And we often have a very materialistic, deterministic view of like what bacteria are in my body, or someone says, oh, I have this or that candida infection and so on. How can I get rid of it? And Enderlein actually shows that according to the terrain or the environment within your biome, certain blood cells or certain fungi actually appeared in a sense out of nowhere. I always like to compare it with like some video games where they're just spawning, but he actually observed that through this particular microscope he used, but was then pretty much, you know, how should I say, thrown into the dustbin of official academics, because, you know, reality cannot possibly be as malleable as he described it, even though he was showing it. Yeah. But this is just some good stuff, I think, to be aware of in terms of how fantastic our bodies actually are and what they can do, given that we, you know, provide its population and microbiome, you know, with the appropriate sustenance, let's say.
Wow. In 1925, Gunther Enderlein produced arguments and proofs for pleomorphism, which have to this date remained undefeated, which is interesting because I would like to see, has anyone tried to repeat these experiments to germinate in a sterile vacuum and succeeded at that? And I'm assuming this was in a sterile vacuum, right? That's his plan. That would be the next question, because if it's not, that's the explanation. That's how Trappist monks make beer. They have the ferment going, and there's a copper rim to kill the more weak bacteria. But then the things that are able to survive that in the copper vat, that's what helps, you know, the fermentation process. So there might be, I mean, you imagine a sneeze, the power of a sneeze, right? So unless this is fully sterile, the likelihood of things coming together and finding a way to survive, that's the question. Like, what was the absolute origin here?
I'm not sure how much this is about like creating anything, as much as it is about just observing that if you change the terrain within the body, things that you would generally define as being separate or that you would have to get infected with, like fungi or so on, can actually just transform within the body live and just like transformers, you know, like rearrange themselves just as the environmental conditions change. And here, just like with the elements, there are types like bacteria, fungi, and so on that we would generally consider to be, let's say, hard differences, you know. But here it appears they can just transform into each other given the proper environmental conditions, which again speaks to the idea of how important the biome is in the terrain within your body, because according to that, the population will reform automatically in a sense, yeah, if what he says is correct. But given that, you know, there's no proper investigation into that, everyone can take their own guess, you know.
Yeah, I mean, it seems pretty logical though, that if you're looking at the examples in something so fluid, then it would take maybe a few more generations with something less plastic like the human race, but we're still pretty plastic. So I can imagine this kind of changes happening pretty far, you know, into the future or relatively quickly. What do you recommend we do in terms of diet, in terms of making ourselves healthier?
I wanted to add something to the
go ahead.
What Raphael said. It's like that the calcium example. if you see it in a way that inside and outside correlates, then whatever is on Earth can be transformed by us, like the population, and the same is inside. So my example would be, I don't eat wood, but I eat mushrooms that eat wood. And the same goes inside of us. So the scientific point of view is that we add something into us, and this causes an effect. It's like vitamin C, for example. Right. Possible. But I think it's much likelier that if we take, for example, vitamin C inside of us, that the microbiome, different species of the microbiome take it and transform it into whatever.
Right.
We do not know, because we don't have full insight in our colons. We can't, because you can see what's coming out, but you can't go inside, like, until now. This is like, we can't do it because of this oxygen stuff.
Mm-hmm.
There are some who live aerobic, some anaerobic, and we can only trace some of them, because we can't go inside and see the factories from the inside, what's going on. So from this point of view, we would have to basically start over with our understanding of nutrition. But we could add, like, herbicides, fungicides, insecticides, not good for us. Antibiotics, well, if it's an emergency, I would take them, but like all the time, very bad idea. I mean, we know.
Right.
Also, one interesting part is that in breast milk, if you breastfeed babies, part of the mother milk is undigestible to the child. It's oligosaccharides, I think is the word. But what it does is, like, if this is it's some kind of sugar, but it's not digestible for us. What it does is that some pathogens are attaching to the oligosaccharides, and then they are just released into the diaper.
So long-term release, yeah.
If you change it to sugar, then the sugar would add to the layer inside of the column with the pathogen, and there it could grow.
Wow.
So this is some kind of Trojan horse in the mother milk that keeps the development of the microbiome in a certain direction.
Interesting. That's such an interesting
It's really interesting.
And they try so hard to get people off of breast milk, but it seems like such a fascinating, powerful. I'm not saying everyone should do it, but maybe everyone should do it up to a certain age, I guess. But I don't know if everyone their whole lives need to be on breast milk. But.
If you're 25 and you're still breastfed.
Well, there are definitely Austrians for that as well. We have psychiatrists and psychoanalysts that can help with that.
It would have to do something with your mother, I suppose.
If it's Austrian. Well, I have to ask you both predictions for where do you see things going in terms of, this is getting worse, is it getting worse? And then also, where is it going better? What are, because of all this information, and what could be the future? What are you afraid the future could be? What do you think the future, what do you hope the future could be?
I think this is designed for disaster. If one source of the problem is the daily diet, and then you have a highly motivated group of people who want to make you healthy, but do not connect to solve the root problem, which is basically the wrong food for us. Right? Like when they discovered vitamin B, like the first one ever, 1897, it was not observed by humans, it was observed by chickens. and they observed that the chickens who lived next to the hospital were fed the rice the patients got. It was after the rice peeling machines were introduced, and then they found out, like, oh, hang on a second, the chickens become sick, and I forgot the name, some kind of a Dutchman, I think it was, Christian. He gave the rice bran, which was taken out from the rice, he gave it to the chickens, and for some reason, miraculously, they discovered. And this was the beginning of the vitamin story.
And everyone in that hospital still died, but those chickens are alive today. No, I'm just kidding. But
that's
basically,
the point.
Yeah,
that's the point. So we know now that determinated rice is bad for chickens, but it's perfectly fine for humans. And I don't know where this is coming from.
Right. They also say humans are good for digesting nuclear waste. So,
And even here, let me
things.
just say the example I mentioned earlier with the Dead Doctors Don't Lie by Joel Wallach, from what I understand, the experiment he used was also with some kind of a chicken heart in like a solution or something. And all he did was make sure every day to change that solution, make it fresh and add the nutrients or whatever, or the minerals required, 93 minerals. And then it just survived until one day his assistant forgot to refresh the water or something. But this just means again that, also the human body is incredibly, like you said, plastic in terms of malleable, adaptable. And it really has a lot to do with the quality of the medium, let's say the water and so on, that we are composed of, in a sense, in terms of how healthy we are, how conductive we are, how good we feel, all of that. So it's quite
thinking about my hand, right?
Pretty simple.
Because I'd cut my finger pretty deep and I super glued it, and then it 3D printed skin for it. So my body did, and now I've got my hand back together. It's like the human body is amazing, right? And all it takes is like some keep it wet and salted, and then you're so it could grow. I mean, as growing up near the ocean, especially salt water, you put something in salt water and it's like your mouth with the film, it starts to heal itself. But
the conductivity is a really
tired.
important part.
Right. The conductivity, but you also get tired from the growth. And so you have to eat the right kinds of food, and your diet shifts. It's almost like being pregnant. You're trying to figure out what you're going to consume, and hardy grains come up almost every time in the diet. But yeah, so do you think that people will start to shift to eating these? I mean, it seems intuitive in some places, like in Europe, you have pumpernickel. In northern Scandinavian kind of Europe, North Europe, you've got denser breads. I mean, it seems like you might be closer to people that could hear this logic. Do you think that that's going to work? Do you think people will eventually start to realize, yeah, you should be eating healthier germ, eat the germ? Will the Austrians eat the germs? Go ahead.
Yeah, the germ is the solution, not.
Don't be afraid of the germs. Just eat them. Just eat them.
Well, I see a development in this direction for the last 20 years. When I started to talk to people, like, maybe there is a connection between health and food.
Would you like to briefly recount your story, Michael, with the president? Would you like to recount the president's story, Michael? Just in terms of an anecdote, the presidential story with your economic mission somewhere in Africa. I forgot which country.
What kind of anecdote?
Oh, where you spoke with the president, and he seemed nice enough, you said, but his advisor seemed kind of evil. Where he went with the Wirtschaftskammer to Africa on the mission and explained it to them. Just, it's interesting, just so that no one can say nobody knew about this or something, Maybe you briefly want to mention it.
What is the story?
It's official.
What's the story? Which president? What?
In Ethiopia, I was on a trade mission in 2005 in Ethiopia, and I was recommending a milling system where you can, at this time I thought the germ is stabilized in a physical way, not heat treatment. Like if you eat whole flour, the germ will be heat treated, which gives a change to the amino acid, like the structure of the amino acids, and of course the vitamins go down if you treat it with heat. This is normal procedure if you eat whole grain, like industrial whole grain. If you have like a stone mill, you can't do this. But this is small, like a fraction of the flour production.
And so you recommended this to the Ethiopian agriculture, the president, you're saying?
The president and the Chamber of Commerce, and there were the milling owners, and they said, well, this is the better solution. Interestingly, I learned that the Ethiopians get their flour from Italy. So Italy is shipping, probably highly subsidized,
right,
grain to Ethiopia.
Weird.
And like in this, I think the last conversation I had 2017 in Austria, and it's like everybody, honestly, everybody, like the president in Ethiopia and the parliament and everybody's like, yes, of course, the germ, where? And then they came up with one reason why it doesn't, it's not possible. One needed a scientific, what's the word? Beweis, Raphael?
Proviso?
Proof. Scientific proof. And then the other one, yeah, they would like to, but the like the food change don't like, they want to have like 2 days more of shelf life. It's like everyone had one reason he could not step over. So this is why it is. But until this very reason, everyone was okay. Well, of course, germ, well, of course, it's the germ. It's like, it's life. It's full of vitamins. And so is this the anecdote you mean? And then when I was in the Bank of Agriculture in Ethiopia, he made me some kind of, well, talk to this guy in the bank. And when I had my appointment there, he had to go away because there was some kind of very interesting surveillance plane. This was also part of the mission.
Well, maybe
priorities.
This is just, and this was the anecdote. Thanks, Michael. And maybe just, everyone can consider how much grain is being consumed. I mean, in every country. And obviously, by now you have the proof, or you have at least the testimony. Governments know about this. So if they really would care about your health, yeah.
Yeah,
It's
but they're
not
more
so
interested in
much-
surveillance planes. That's exciting.
It's not so. It's really, Raphael. I know it's hard to grasp. It's not so much that they don't care. They are bound in a certain way. It's a structural problem.
Sure. Yes, agreed. Yes.
So, like politics, if they need the scientific proof that cannot be brought, but still they need it, what to do?
But they could, I mean, even here, I'm sorry, but set up a double-blind study, have different diets, If there was true interest, this would already have been funded 100 times over, So you can't tell me that,
Yeah,
I
I feel like
agree.
they already do that though. I mean, like you were
Of
saying,
course, and they know, but these, I mean,
Yeah.
how many studies don't get published because they don't have the proper results?
I don't think you need the
breathing is healthy
study.
for you. Let's
You don't
rather
need
not
you don't
publish
need the
that.
study. You just need you sell the more healthy food for more money on a higher shelf, so it's harder to get to and it costs more money. And so you take away
It's
more and
also
more.
very interesting point, because the whole grain would be cheaper than the white flour.
Right. So why is that also, by the way? Why would it be cheaper?
Why? Because you have the grain and you mill it, and then you have the flour. It's like 100%.
Right.
If you want to have the same amount of white flour, you have to mill more grains. The germ is 3%, and I think the brown is 15%. So you have 18% loss.
Yeah.
And for some reason, the refined stuff is cheaper than the whole stuff. This makes no sense at all.
Unless it's part of some sort of plot. That could be the thing.
Right. Now we have.
I'm just so glad you mentioned it, you know.
Well, it could be. Well, I love that you took the time to tell us all these things. I want to try to make sure people can follow your work. Do you recommend that they go to the, let me see, the MFR blog?
Now you go to goldkeim.com.
Okay,
This will be not so interesting. There you have just more or less the necessary information.
And I kind of went over this page for a second, but we can also look at it a bit more. It has an entire history here in English, which is not too hard for you to read, America. It says the different qualities of flour, nearly always germinated flour, rather rarely heat processed flour, hardly ever Goldkeim flour. So
Goldkeim was this you can't say it's shitty flour. You have to be better. And
right.
Since they hijacked the word flour, I had to come up with a new word. I hate it. Actually, I hate it.
That's not a bad word. I like it. Goldkeim. Well, the difference, though, you said, so one is completely just stripped. The other one is heat processed. And
right.
You came up with this different version. So what makes it not, how do you process it at all? Is it processed at all? I mean, what do you do with it before it becomes
Goldkeim flour is just, if you have a mill, you put in grains and you mill it, and this is what it is. This is flour.
Wow.
It would be the same as if you put the grains in your mouth and you chew it heavily.
So how is it not lost through Goldkeim milling versus how is it lost by stone milling? Seems to destroy it. Why does Goldkeim milling
no, stone milling does not destroy.
Oh no, it's fine.
No,
okay.
It's the roller mills.
Oh, so those are good. Okay.
The roller mills have the possibility to extract the germ. It's like it's called passages. It's a combination of roller mills and sieves. And the rollers get closer, and the flour becomes finer and finer and finer. And normally it's the third passage. So it goes through the roller mill over the sieve. The sieve is shaking, and then it's like you have the different particle sizes, and they go on the next passage. And then it's the reason they are so high, these buildings, because it goes up and then it goes down. And on the third passage, the germ is squeezed, that it looks like a little bit like a lentil. And this can be sorted out by the sieve. So industrialized flour production is that you grind the flour, the grain, you separate brown endosperm and the germ. It goes in different particle sizes of the endosperm, like the flour. And if the company calls the mill, they say, well, I want to have this kind of flour, and then they program it and mix it together again. So it's separated, and then according to the need, it is mixed again.
And that's this out of competition because it's silly and rich flour. That's what that is.
No, this is in America and Canada mostly. That they enrich the flour with folic acid, I think.
Oh, okay.
Folic?
I believe they did the same with salt and iodine, by the way. Same BS story.
Right. Trying to put something back in it. Wow.
But the really fun part of this is folic acid is a lot of in the bran, and there's a lot of in the germ. So they take it out, then they use genetically modified microorganisms that produce folic acid, and then they mix it back. And still it's cheaper than whole grain.
God, it's so ridiculous. Pay all these people to do all these things and run all these factories to make all this stuff to replace a plant that grows.
Well, let's put it very simply, and I think this is not too secret of an information. Certain microstates within Italy, supposedly, and who dare say, maybe invested in certain pharmaceutical endeavors. And if we just were to consider that on some level, and obviously it connects, the food industry and the health industry have some kind of a profit share cartel or something,
Yeah.
then of course it makes perfect sense why invest so much money to create such low quality food. If then of course you have people not just financially dependent or whatever, but also consciously like dependent on the all kinds of other things for their own health, which is the most intimate, important thing in this life, I would say. So yeah.
So if you're in America, you know, God forbid, and you're trying to figure out a way to get some Goldkeim style true grain, you know, with your germ in your endosperm, how do you get it? How would someone find this stuff? Can you go to a store? Do you have to go to a Whole Foods? Can you go on the internet? What do you have to do?
Either you have a mill at home and grains and you mill it yourself, or you go to, there's a big movement in America, like artisan bread and whole, like I think it's even more than in Europe.
Nice. Good job, us.
Yeah.
That's good.
So the moment you see someone grinding the grain, it's very difficult to take the germ out. It's very difficult to heat treat it.
Right.
You need a huge industry for that. Whatever is smaller, if you have a bakery and they grind the flour, you go to a whole food shop and they grind the flour. This would be Goldkeim. Goldkeim is a word for flour as it used to be until 1860.
Excellent.
That
So yeah,
makes
I
it
mean,
a little bit confusing.
and maybe even guys, if you're or guys and gals talking to your bakers, like, you know, I mean, most towns have a local baker still, you know, ask them if they're keeping,
Them.
yeah, if they're
Really?
doing it, yeah.
Ask and nail them. Like my Pinky the Brain plan was like, if you use this brand, you guarantee that this is this quality, because the flour, the mills that produce the heat treated germ flour, normally they say, well, it's very good because it has the germ, and for some reason they skip the word heat treated. So I wanted to have this logo used as a contract. If you say this is it, it has to be this. It has to be it. And if you cheat on that, you should be stoned, but not in the herbal way.
Right.
Because it's, if you read it on the website, the side effects, if you have insufficient supply of the ingredients of the germ, you get a perfect match for civilization disease. You get a perfect match for civilization disease. I do not think that it's the only cause, but you get a perfect match for civilization disease.
It explains
like,
a lot.
For example, there was I think it was in first part of the 20th century, they did an experiment and fed rats on white flour, and for some reason they became sterile.
Wow.
In the 3rd generation.
Wow.
And this is what we have.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Interesting. That's crazy. So like, yeah, I mean, we should know better, you know, and it's funny because we think of how valuable it is to have so many loaves of Wonder Bread on our shelves that can last for 3 years or something, rather than, again, a loaf of bread you're saying that would last a month. I mean, that's impressive, you know, compared to a French baguette that's, you get it for about a day. So
yeah,
it's pretty crazy.
Then you can use it as a hammer, literally.
Yes, the French Revolution was Saint-Just versus the baguette. That's actually, they don't tell you that in school, but that's what really went down. Michael, I really appreciate that you came. We're gonna have to talk again. I look forward to finding out more about this. And everyone at home, you can look up Goldkeim, and you can go to his blog. I'll share it again just anyway, because in case because we got people into this stuff. And there's a translate button. Learn how to use this translate button here, and you can translate even the German articles right away. See, no problem.
Wow, didn't know that.
Yeah, see, so we can get through this. And so, yeah, so check out his website. Definitely go to his blog and read some of the German articles so you can feel like you translated something. And was there another plug I was supposed to give? There was a book or something you wanted to show, or no?
Oh, there will be a
There's
book.
a book in production right now, and I'm looking forward to have it translated. I
Excellent.
think to me it's really important. I mean, it's our staple.
Yeah.
If you have a car that doesn't work and you put the right fuel in it, it makes a lot more fun to drive.
Right.
And
yeah.
our bodies are the same.
Yeah. Well, I look forward to the book. So let me know when that happens, and we'll put links up so people can find that as well. And hopefully by the time, we'll put that link in this video as well. So thanks for being there. Take care.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, guys.
Hey, everybody, tune in to Recent Tartarians.
Recent Tartarian. Recent Tartarian. Carry Recent Tartarian. Recent Tartarian. Recent Tartarian.
Hey, everybody, tune in to Recent Tartarian.
Recent Tartarians. Recent Tartarian.